Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with TB Fork, and this is day 18 of the 80 Days to Your Dream Body course. Today's protein source is going to be beef liver, and today is a legs and abs training routine. And the theme for today's workout is CRAC PNF stretching. So right now, I'm going to be demonstrating how to perform CRAC PNF stretching. Now let's get started. And while we are resting, we are going to continue with our CRAC PNF demonstration. I've shown you how to perform all of these stretches on a patient. Now I'm going to show you how to do them on yourself. We're going to be focusing on everything that we've done on the table. We're going to be doing the hip extensors and medial and lateral rotators for this portion right now. When we are focusing on the hip extensors, we're going to be in a supine position. And because we're focusing on the extensors, we're going to take the knee into flexion. But we're going to get into a supine position. And if we want to target the fibers straight down the center, we're going to go into straight flexion. So what we would do is grasp and clasp the hands behind the back of the leg, and then we would go ahead, find a nice comfortable stretch. Then you would inhale and contract by pressing into you, and then exhale and actively go into hip flexion as much as you can. And as an added bonus, if you want, you could gently guide yourself a little bit deeper. And then if you want to target more of the medial compartment, so the posteromedial fibers of the hip, what we would do is go into abduction. So we're going to go into abduction of 30 degrees. Same thing. We're going to grasp right behind the back of the leg. We are going to get a nice comfortable stretch. Inhale, contract, and then exhale, drive the knee toward your armpit. And same thing. If you want, you could just gently guide yourself a little bit deeper. If we want to get even more into the medial fibers, we're going to drop the leg down to 60, and we could either grasp with both hands or we could just go with one hand over top. Same thing though. We would find a nice comfortable stretch. We would inhale and contract, and then exhale, try and bring the knee or the knee toward the armpit. And then again, if you want, you could just gently guide yourself a little bit deeper. And to get the most medial fibers, we're going to go into abduction of 90 degrees. So the hip is all the way down. And what we would do is just find a nice comfortable stretch. Inhale, push down. So we're contracting the muscle. Exhale, go into abduction in the coronal plane. So we're actively bringing our knee up toward our armpit. And then again, if we want, we can just gently guide it to get deeper into the stretch. And then if we wanted to target more of the lateral compartment of the posterior thigh, what we would do is go into a deduction. When we go into adduction, we start targeting more of the lateral compartment. So from this one, we would go into adduction of 30 degrees. Same thing, we would grasp right behind the back of the leg. We would bring the arm toward the opposite shoulder. And then we would inhale, push, exhale, bring the knee toward the opposite shoulder. And if you want, you could just gently guide it. If we want to get even more into the lateral compartment, we go down to 60. And once again, we could either use both hands or just use an overhand grip. So we would go into flexion. We would find a nice comfortable stretch. Inhale, push, and exhale, relax. And on the exhale, we actively go into hip flexion by trying to bring the knee as close toward the opposite shoulder as possible. And if we want, we can just guide it a little bit. And to get the most lateral fibers, we're going to go to 90 degrees. So now we're parallel to the ground. Same thing. We're going to find a comfortable stretch. Inhale, contract, and then exhale, activate the antagonist muscle by going into the opposite motion. So we're actively going into flexion of the hip. And then again, if we want, we can gently guide it. That is to target the posterior fibers that is to target the extensors of the hip. If we want to target the medial and lateral rotators of the hip, what we would do is we would go into a seated position, and there's different angles that we could do. If we want to do the 30-degree angle, the same way that we did with the patients, what we would do is lay down in a supine position. So for the medial rotators, we want to go into lateral rotation. So for the medial rotators, we would go ahead and drape the foot over the knee. We would lay down to get that 30-degree angle, drop the foot down toward the floor, inhale, push up, and then exhale, actively try and get your hip down toward your knee down toward the floor. If we wanted to target it at 60 degrees, we would move up to the elbows. Or if it's more comfortable, you could place straight arms behind your back until you find that 60-degree angle. But same thing, we would go as much into a nice comfortable stretch, then we would inhale, contract, exhale, actively go and try and bring your knee toward the floor. Then 90 degrees, we would sit up a little bit taller. Same thing, inhale, go into lateral rotation, contract, exhale, drive your knee more into lateral rotation. And then at 120 degrees, we're in a tall seated position. So in that tall seated position, we're going into lateral rotation. And then we are inhaling, going into medial rotation and adduction by pressing into the hand. And then exhaling, driving the knee down toward the ground. And if we wanted to target the lateral rotators, we would go into medial rotation. So for this one, we would take the leg outside and then go in. So for 30 degrees, we would be laying in a supine position. Find a stretch, inhale, push up, exhale, sink down. So bring the knee down to the floor. For 30 degrees, we could either get up to the elbows or place the hands behind us. Same thing. We would inhale, push up, exhale, sink deeper down toward the ground. For 90 degrees, get up a little bit taller, get the stretch, inhale, push, exhale, relax, and sink deeper into it. So we're actively going into medial rotation to stretch the lateral rotators. And then at 120, we're in a tall seated position. Same thing. Find that comfortable stretch, inhale, push up, exhale, drive that knee down toward the floor. And that is how we would do some CRAC PNF stretching on ourselves for the hip extensors and the medial and lateral rotators of the hip. Our rest period is up. Time for set number 5. That was just a tiny taste of what can be found in my members only section. If you enjoyed it, become a member for only $5 a month to get access to hundreds of member only videos.